Following our exploration of the Recovery Fund's purpose, payment limits, and aggregate caps, it is equally important to understand what the fund does not cover. While the Arizona Real Estate Recovery Fund provides meaningful protection to consumers harmed by the fraudulent or dishonest actions of real estate licensees, its scope of compensation is deliberately narrow. The fund exists to restore victims for actual monetary losses, not to serve as a comprehensive source of reimbursement for every type of damage or cost arising from a real estate dispute. Under ARS Section 32-2188C, the Recovery Fund is specifically limited to covering actual and direct out-of-pocket financial losses that result from a real estate licensee's violation of Arizona law while performing licensed activities. It does not cover speculative, indirect, or punitive damages. The law clearly distinguishes between compensatory losses, those that can be objectively proven with receipts, contracts, or judgments, and other categories of damages that are subjective, emotional, or unrelated to financial harm. For example, if a salesperson knowingly falsifies property disclosures and sells a home with undisclosed foundation issues, the Recovery Fund may compensate the buyer for the actual repair costs they incurred to fix the foundation. However, the fund will not reimburse the buyer for emotional distress, inconvenience, or perceived loss of enjoyment of the property. Its focus is on restoring the tangible financial position of the victim, not addressing intangible harm. The first major category of damages that the Recovery Fund does not pay includes punitive damages, which are designed to punish the wrongdoer rather than compensate the victim. Arizona courts often award punitive damages in fraud cases to deter future misconduct, but the Recovery Fund is a limited public resource funded by licensees, not a punitive tool. As such, the fund cannot be used to satisfy any portion of a court judgment that includes punitive damages. The fund also does not pay attorney fees, court costs, or legal expenses incurred by the claimant, even if the court awards them as part of a judgment. The reasoning is that the fund's primary function is to reimburse direct financial losses tied to the real estate transaction itself, not to cover the costs of litigation. For instance, if a claimant spends $15,000 on attorney fees to obtain a $25,000 judgment against a broker, the Recovery Fund can only reimburse the $25,000 actual loss, not the $15,000 in legal expenses. In addition, the Recovery Fund does not cover interest on judgments, consequential damages, or lost profits. Consequential damages refer to secondary losses that occur as an indirect result of the original harm. For example, if a fraudulent land sale delays a buyer's development project, causing them to lose potential business income, that lost income is considered consequential, not direct damage. Similarly, if the buyer borrowed money to purchase the property and continues to accrue interest on that loan after the fraud is discovered, that interest is not reimbursable through the fund. Another category excluded from Recovery Fund compensation includes contract disputes, breach of contract claims, or commission disagreements between licensees and their clients, or between brokers and agents. These are considered civil or professional disputes rather than fraudulent acts against the public. For example, if a seller claims that an agent failed to market their property adequately, that dispute would not qualify for payment from the fund, as it does not involve fraud, deceit, or conversion of funds. The fund also does not pay claims arising from unlicensed activity. Under ARS Section 322165, individuals who operate without a valid real estate license are subject to civil penalties and criminal prosecution, but their victims cannot recover losses through the Recovery Fund. This restriction reinforces the importance of verifying a professional's license status before engaging in a transaction. Only misconduct by a properly licensed real estate professional during the scope of licensed activity qualifies for potential compensation. Similarly, the Recovery Fund excludes losses related to business opportunities mortgages, or timeshare sales, unless the activity falls under the specific authority of the Arizona Department of Real Estate and the licensee was operating within their licensure. For instance, an investor who loses money in a private lending deal with a real estate licensee acting as a lender, not as a broker, would not be entitled to recovery fund compensation, since the transaction falls outside the scope of licensed real estate activities. It is also critical to understand that the fund cannot be used to reimburse property depreciation, lost rental income, or anticipated appreciation in value. These are market-based losses that cannot be directly attributed to the licensee's fraud or misconduct. The recovery fund's purpose is to restore victims to their prior financial position, not to compensate for lost opportunities or speculative gains. In addition to these financial limitations, the recovery fund does not pay claims made by certain parties who are considered too closely related to the licensee or transaction. Under ARS Section 32-2188E, claims made by the licensee's spouse, child, parent, or business associate are not eligible for compensation, as these relationships may present conflicts of interest or collusion concerns. The fund also excludes claims by lenders, title companies, or entities engaged in the business of constructing or selling real estate, since they are presumed to have the expertise and resources to protect themselves through contracts and insurance. The restrictions on recovery fund payments serve an essential purpose. They ensure that the fund remains financially sustainable and focused on its core mission, protecting consumers who lack other remedies. They also reinforce the principle that the fund is not an alternative to proper due diligence, professional insurance, or the court system, but a narrowly targeted safeguard against verified fraud and deceit. Review summary. In this section, you learned that the recovery fund only compensates actual, verifiable financial losses caused by the fraudulent or dishonest acts of a licensed real estate professional. It does not cover punitive damages, legal fees, emotional distress, consequential damages, lost profits, or disputes involving contracts or commissions. The fund also excludes claims arising from unlicensed activity, business opportunity deals, or market-based losses, such as property depreciation. Claims made by relatives, associates, or entities engaged in real estate business are also excluded under ARS Section 32-2188E. These exclusions preserve the fund's solvency and ensure it remains available for consumers who have no other means of recovery. Discussion. Why does the recovery fund exclude punitive damages and legal fees? Answer. Because it is a public protection fund intended to cover actual monetary losses, not to punish wrongdoers or pay litigation costs. Can a consumer recover losses from unlicensed activity through the recovery fund? Answer. No. Only losses caused by licensed real estate professionals acting within the scope of their licensure qualify. Why does the recovery fund exclude business opportunity and investment losses? Answer. Because those transactions often fall outside the scope of licensed real estate activities and involve speculative risks. What type of damages does the recovery fund pay? Answer. Only actual direct financial losses resulting from a licensee's fraudulent or dishonest conduct. Who is prohibited from filing a recovery fund claim? Answer. The licensee's immediate family members, business partners, and other entities engaged in real estate-related industries. Closing remarks. The exclusions placed on the Arizona Real Estate Recovery Fund highlight the state's focus on maintaining a fair, disciplined, and sustainable system for consumer protection. By limiting compensation to verified, direct financial losses, the fund fulfills its intended purpose, without becoming a substitute for civil courts or private insurance. For real estate professionals, these restrictions serve as a powerful reminder of their duty to uphold honesty, transparency, and compliance in every transaction. For consumers, understanding these limitations underscores the importance of conducting due diligence and working only with licensed, reputable professionals. The Recovery Fund remains a vital safety net, but one reserved for the most serious and verifiable cases of financial harm caused by licensee misconduct.